Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. We thank you for joining us on this day. We're going to be talking about Tennessee, Georgia, of course. The Vols actually score more points on Georgia than anyone else this year. They put up a bigger lead on Georgia than anyone else this year, and yet they lost 41-17, which I think says more about Georgia than it does Tennessee. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about the past, the future, what all of it means. We'll get into everything. The meaning of life today on the Sports Source. Let's dig right in. First segment of our program brought to you by Junk Be Gone. Whether you need the help at home or at work, Junk Be Gone can help you get rid of junk, big or small. Whether that's garbage, whether that's old furniture. They even do small demolition work. Say you've got a shed that needs to be taken apart, an old boat that's falling apart, you need that thing taken apart and hauled off. They do it. Junk Be Gone. They do it all. Give them a call this week or visit them at junkbegone.biz. All right, here are the guys I want you to visit with at the top of the show. We got 9 of us on here today, but the first 4 are Will Overstreet, VFL right here. Jimmy Himes, Josh Ward, both these guys from 99.1, The Sports Animal.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I nailed it. Right down, I don't know, after 15 years of just saying the same WNML, it's hard for me to fall in the groove. VFL Marlon Walls down there. All right. Guys, after the Alabama loss, I thought there were things to like. After the Kentucky win, I thought there were things to, make note of that, okay, this is going to be a trouble if you do this every week. After yesterday's loss to #1 Georgia, I just thought, that's about what I expected. I did see, though, on a couple of social media spots where people were saying, where were the adjustments? The coaches made no adjustments. I just thought, if you're playing Kentucky, I'll give you the adjustment talk. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see a lot of adjustments that could be made that would have made a difference in that game yesterday. I just thought that one was one where you saw a team that has been recruiting up there with the Alabamas and the Clemsons for the last 4 or 5 years. It seems to be that they've put it all together this year. I just thought the talent gap was off the charts yesterday. Your thoughts?
Well, the adjustments were on signing day.
Right.
Yeah. That's when they were. Yeah, Georgia's just a better team. And there were folks who would call every now and then and say, well, the turning point was this, or what about this play? You can point to several of them. Look, the turning point is Georgia just better. And I thought they controlled the line of scrimmage against Tennessee. Tennessee got off to a great start, but after the first quarter, it was all Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it, number 41 there in the second half has 3 sacks. That's 3 sacks against a right tackle, your left tackle, and he's just better than him. He's beating him off the edge, and there's not adjustments to that when, a number 41, your defensive end, can just come off the edge. You don't have to rush anybody else, and he's going to be back there in about 2 seconds and get your guy on the ground. So that's really what it is. You're talking about recruiting, getting talent in certain spots and building up there because you were outmatched. That was clear the whole game yesterday.
Guys, you agree?
Totally. Will there have been segments this year where you've talked about pass rush for Tennessee and guys need more moves, more playmaking ability? Georgia's the best example of what Will's talking about. And it's across the board. So there's only so much you can adjust to when they're much faster and bigger and stronger in every way.
Yep. I would say the adjustment, we talk about adjustments. The adjustments was Georgia got kind of used to our tempo. And what happened at that point was those guys on the edges, who was actually a little bit bigger than some of our offensive tackles, to be honest with you, they made the adjustment, got adjusted to our tempo, and they started to have some success. And I think that's the adjustment that was made in last night's football game.
And one thing that stood out, Jimmy, we talked about it on Friday. I thought this was going to be a game where you needed broken tackles. That offense spreads everybody out, so you've got one-on-one matchups. You're going to have to win those matchups. You're going to have to outspeed someone. You didn't see it. You didn't see it for much of that game. And I just thought that shows you what you're talking about in terms of your talent. You don't have the guys, no offense to these guys, they've still got a chance to win 8 games, which we'll talk about, but you didn't have guys that can line up and beat their guy for Georgia, not only consistently, but much of any time during that game.
I'll tell you this, just watching the game yesterday, what really stood out to me was when you watch Georgia defense make plays, when they hit you, you're going down. There wasn't a whole bunch of I can stiff arm a guy and get free or get an extra 3 yards. They actually swarmed to the football, and when they hit you, you were going backwards. And that was a big difference in yesterday's football game.
Along those lines, I thought a big difference was the defensive team speed. My goodness, Georgia can run. And you watch them play, and then you flip over to Tennessee's defense. Tennessee's defense can't run like that. Now, maybe a lot of teams in the country can't.
Right.
But I think that is one of the issues Tennessee's defense has in trying to corral quarterbacks or make tackles. I just think the team speed's got to improve.
When you look at this Tennessee team and that Georgia roster, how many guys for Tennessee would start for that Georgia team? It's a short list. It's a very short. And ironically, I would say he didn't have his best game yesterday, obviously. I was not impressed by Stetson Bennett going against Tennessee's defense. I'm not so sure Hendon Hooker wouldn't be a guy I would choose over Bennett because Hooker versus their defense, I think he'd look every bit as good as Stetson Bennett would if he was going against that Georgia defense. But you're talking maybe quarterback, Cade Mays maybe, although he left Georgia to come here. There isn't a long list of guys who would start down there.
No, I mean, maybe you find one of the receivers, Tillman or somebody like that, maybe you gets out there. But other than that, I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, you just look at it and go, yep, nobody's going to be starting for that group.
Marlon, you had one thing that ticked you off watching it yesterday.
Yeah.
Along these lines.
Yeah, as a former coach, high school wise, I'll make it real quick. That circle's very small, and so even with that being said, one of the guys that's on the sidelines for us yesterday's game, we're talking back and forth, is Mose Phillips that played running back here, a great running back.
One of the greatest
Tennessee.
runs in UT history that everybody remembers.
Exactly. Well, number 5 for Georgia, Adonis Mitchell, is actually his kid from last year. And I can remember talking to the head coach and him saying, hey, man, I'm waiting on Tennessee to pull the trigger, and they did not pull the trigger. And now you're looking at a guy that's starting receiver at Georgia on the #1 team in the nation. And actually in some of that game when we needed critical stops, that was the guy that they was throwing the ball to. Yep. So that's kind of frustrating on my side. That's a Tennessee kid that should be in our uniform, and now we're talking about recruiting-wise and the big gap. We had a chance to pull the trigger on him.
And Pruitt just never
didn't pull the trigger. Want to see him in person is what he said to him.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and people are going to be upset with Heupel's recruiting this year because it's not going to compare to Georgia's. He's going to have to get out ahead of this moving forward in terms of identifying the right prospects. I mean, we all know every coach talks about the fact that we don't go by the star rankings. Okay, if these guys are truly going by their own evaluations, they better get them right. You can't miss on guys like that. If you have somebody that can start at Georgia who's a Tennessee kid and you're late making the call, inexcusable at this point. Any other thoughts, just overall reaction to what you saw yesterday? Anybody surprised by the way it turned out?
No, not at all. Kirby Smart after the Florida game, and that's talking about Florida, which at the time was at a higher level, but he said you can't outcoach recruiting. Yeah. And last night was the latest example.
Yeah. The only thing that came down to the wire was Chuck's line yesterday. Just a freakish year he's having. He's going to predict the line for the South Alabama game later in the show, but his line last week was 23.5. It was a 24-point game. I can't tell you how many games I've gone down to the wire biting my nails on the last drive. And Chuck, your over-under was 59.5. The total was 58. Stick around for the Tennessee South Alabama predictions because Nostra Chuckus over here is doing a great job.
And I missed every dang one of them.
Yeah, the only thing more impressive than what he's doing would be if somebody was, like 10 for 10 on the year picking against his spread. Wouldn't that be great? When we come back, was Josh Heupel's offense exposed at all? And I've counted up Tennessee's defensive snaps. We'll tell you how many extra games they've played next, and does that matter? Come on back on the Sports Source.